Okay, let's dive in. Today we're unpacking a really tough but vital topic, understanding abusive relationships. It's something that affects so many people, often in ways that are, hidden or hard to talk about. We've gathered some great resources for this deep dive. We're looking at articles from Psychology Today and Very Well Mind, plus some research insights. Think of us as sorting through this material for you, aiming to get a clearer picture of what abuse looks like, how you might recognize it, and, well, tackling that big question: can abusive partners actually change? We'll touch on things that might surprise you, like listening to your own body's signals, and even asking some hard questions about our own behaviors. We're going to use a case study, too, from that Psychology Today article, Abusive Partners Can Change. It's about John, a lawyer. His story kind of grounds the whole discussion in, the complexities of real life.
Yeah, John's case really shows how messy this can be right from the start. He went into treatment sounding desperate to fix things with his partner, Anne. This was after an incident where he blocked her away during a fight. It escalated to physical assault, and he even threatened their son, who stepped in.
Wow.
He felt intense shame afterwards and asked him to leave. And while he technically did seek help himself, the source makes the point that it wasn't purely voluntary and wouldn't even think about reconciling unless he got help first.
So the pressure was on.
Exactly. And that really highlights something crucial the sources stress. Abuse isn't just one type of person or one specific situation, and it's definitely not just physical violence or what gets called domestic violence.
Hmm.
There's a broader term, domestic abuse, that covers, well, a much wider range of harmful behaviors.
Right. And the sources really break down those different types, don't they? What kinds of abuse do they point out?
They detail quite a few. You've got verbal and emotional abuse. That's things like insults, name calling, constant put downs, manipulation, the silent treatment, guilt trips. And they specifically call out gaslighting, that really damaging tactic of twisting things, lying, making someone doubt their own reality, their own memory.
Ugh, yeah, that's insidious.
It really is. Then there's psychological abuse. Things like isolating someone from friends or family, controlling their everyday life, making decisions for them, using threats or intimidation.
Okay.
Financial abuse is another one, controlling money, stopping someone from working or getting education. Sexual abuse, obviously, any forced or coerced sexual act. And one source even mentioned cultural abuse, like suppressing someone's cultural background.
That's a lot more than just the physical side.
Definitely. And the Very Well Mind source really emphasizes that. It says these non-physical forms are just as destructive. They erode trust, connection, the whole foundation of the relationship bond. Some teams are even more destructive because they wear down a person's self-worth bit by bit over time.
That makes total sense. And it probably explains why the non-physical stuff can be so hard to spot, right?
Yeah.
Especially early on. So if that's what abuse is, how do the sources suggest we can actually recognize it? Whether it's happening to us, or maybe we see signs in someone else's relationship, what are those red flags?
Yeah, the articles list several common signs, like feeling you're constantly walking on eggshells around your partner, being super careful about everything you say or do.
Trying not to set them off.
Exactly. Or finding yourself making excuses for their behavior to other people,
Wow.
downplaying how bad it really is.
Hmm. What about how you feel?
That's a big one. Feeling unsafe or scared or just completely drained and exhausted after interacting with them.
Okay.
Another major flag is feeling cut off from your support system. Maybe your partner actively discourages you from seeing friends or family or makes it really difficult.
Right.
And then there's the blame shifting, that classic, look what you made me do, or you push my buttons. The abuser making the reaction your fault.
Those are clear behavioral things to watch for. But that Psychology Today article, are you in an emotionally abusive relationship? It added another layer, didn't it?
Yeah.
Especially for emotional abuse, which is, like you said, often gradual and harder to pin down.
Yes, that source has a really powerful insight. It says, beyond just looking at specific incidents, you need to pay close attention to how you feel in the relationship, not just emotionally, but physically too.
Physically.
Yeah, because emotional abuse works by chipping away at your self-worth, making you doubt your own judgment. So trusting your gut feelings can become hard.
So it's less about keeping a log of bad events and more about tuning into your own internal state.
Precisely. The source suggests contrasting it with how you feel in a healthy relationship, generally safe, relaxed, comfortable being yourself, able to speak up without fear, just, at ease.
Okay, that makes sense as a baseline.
Emotionally abusive relationships, on the other hand, are inherently stressful. They keep your system kind of on high alert all the time. And this chronic stress isn't just mental, it shows up in your body. The source calls your body an informant, giving you clues that your mind might be trying to explain away.
Your body as an informant. I like that phrasing.
It's compelling, isn't it? That constant stress keeps your nervous system activated, flooding you with hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Fine for a short burst, but long term, it weakens your immune system, impacts your physical health.
So what kind of physical symptoms are we talking about?
The article lists quite a few potential signs linked to this chronic stress. Things like chronic headaches or migraines, feeling tired all the time, digestive problems, maybe unexplained weight changes, hair loss, high blood pressure, constant muscle tension, back pain, irregular periods for women, insomnia, even trouble with memory or feeling like you're in a brain fog.
Wow, that's a wide range.
It is. So the key takeaway there is listen not just to your emotions, but listen to your body too. Notice these physical signals with curiosity without judging yourself. Your body might be telling you something really important about your environment.
That's powerful advice, especially when manipulation can make you second-guess your feelings. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. The sources also tackle a really tough angle. How do you know if you might be the one engaging in abusive behavior? That very well-mined article, How to Know If You Are an Abusive Spouse, it really goes there, doesn't it? It forces some difficult self-reflection.
Yeah, it's incredibly hard for most people to see these patterns in themselves, especially if maybe you grew up seeing unhealthy dynamics as normal. The sources pose some very direct, potentially uncomfortable questions.
And they really don't hold back. Things like,
Right.
has your partner actually told you point blank that you're abusive? Do you get the sense your spouse is afraid of you?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever threatened them, even subtly? Do you tend to believe your way is the only right way?
They also ask about specific actions. Have you ever physically hurt them, hit, slapped, pushed, pulled hair, choked?
Yeah.
Do you struggle with intense jealousy? Do you feel you have a right to constantly know where they are, what they're doing? Are you calling or texting nonstop when they're out?
Do you feel like you need to be in charge? Do you, disturbingly, get some kind of satisfaction from seeing them upset or hurt? Or maybe justify it by thinking they deserved it?
All right. Or have you ever deliberately broken their things?
What about external signs? Like, have you ever been arrested for violence? Do other people comment on your anger? Or maybe paranoia?
Are you perhaps scared to get help because you might lose everything? Has your partner tried to leave before? Do you think about getting even with them?
And it circles back to those psychological tactics, too. Do you twist things around, lie, exaggerate, basically gaslight them?
Yeah.
Do you often raise your voice or call names in arguments?
Do you use intimidation, threats, humiliation, control their social life, their money, use jealousy to justify monitoring them? And critically, do you blame them for your own outbursts?
Hearing those all laid out,
Yeah.
it's pretty confronting. The sources also mention that sometimes this realization might come from things your partner's already tried to tell you.
Exactly. Things like saying you interfere with their friendships, that they have no privacy, that you shut down emotionally, that they feel like they're walking on eggshells.
Or that you're too controlling, maybe things are calmer when you're not there, or they need your permission for basic things like spending money or making plans.
Yeah, if any of that resonates, the sources suggest looking at potential drivers. Often, abuse is learned behavior picked up from childhood, maybe media, social norms. John's story with his stepfather and being bullied kind of hints at that.
Okay, so learned pattern.
Learned patterns or unresolved trauma from the past playing out now. Sometimes, though not always, certain personality disorders or traits involving difficulty with empathy or regulating emotions might be involved. And then there's the power and control motive, which is central to frameworks like the Duluth model. Sometimes it really is just about wanting to dominate and control the other person.
So complex roots. Learned behavior, trauma, maybe personality factors, or a drive for control.
Right. And the sources, especially looking at John again, make a really important distinction between blame and guilt. John initially focused on blaming Anne for shutting him out. That's often a defense, right? To avoid feeling bad about yourself.
Makes sense.
Guilt, though, is different. Guilt means acknowledging your bad behavior. It's painful, sure, but it's absolutely necessary because it opens the door to taking responsibility, to accountability, and maybe, just maybe, to making things right.
So owning it is step one.
That's the clear message from the sources. Change has to start with accountability. No excuses. Owning it is the absolute foundation.
Accountability. Okay, that leads us straight to the big question from that article title. Can abusive partners truly change? The sources seem to say, yes, it's possible, but with some really big buts.
That's exactly right. They emphasize it's actually quite rare without serious, structured help. Real change isn't just saying sorry or feeling bad for a bit. It means tackling those deep-rooted patterns and beliefs head on, and that's incredibly hard, uncomfortable work.
So what kind of help does work, according to these sources? What's needed?
They point to long-term professional support as being key. Things like individual therapy, group therapy. They mention specific approaches like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which helps change negative thinking, and also trauma-informed approaches.
Okay.
And then there are batterer intervention programs, BIPs. These are specifically designed for people who use abuse, often court-ordered. They focus heavily on accountability and challenging those beliefs about power and control.
Right. Specialized program.
Yes. And they also mention that healing often needs supportive relationships, but crucially, relationships with strong boundaries. The partner who is harmed usually needs space and safety separate from the abuser's change process.
And just as important, what do they say doesn't work?
Yeah.
Because I think there are a lot of myths out there.
Oh, absolutely. Quick fixes. Forget it. There's no magic bullet.
Yeah.
Couples counseling, if it's not specifically designed to handle abuse, can often backfire. It might even give the abuser more opportunity to manipulate or blame.
That's a really important warning.
It is. And things like the victim's love or patience or forgiveness, while valuable in themselves, they don't actually stop the abuse. Promises to change also mean nothing without real, consistent changes in behavior that you can actually see.
Actions, not just words.
Exactly. And John's case study lays out this really intensive roadmap for what genuine change looks like, according to the source. Step 1, absolutely non-negotiable, stop the abusive behavior now, stop hurting the family, safety first.
Immediately. Got it.
Right. Then he had to learn to sit with his own guilt rather than just blaming Anne. He needed to broaden his definition of abuse. Recognize it wasn't just the physical stuff, but the yelling, the name-calling, the jealousy, the criticism, how that created fear and unpredictability for Anne.
Understanding the full impact.
Yes. Then learning to tolerate emotional injury, meaning when your feelings get hurt in a relationship, which happens, you learn to manage that hurt yourself without lashing out. Identifying and sharing feelings honestly was another big one. Anger is often just the tip of the iceberg, right? Covering up fear, hurt, shame. If you only connect with the anger, you're likely to punish someone. John felt anger, but there were tears, underlying pain, too.
Getting beneath the anger.
Exactly. Humility was key, too, letting go of that defensive, easily wounded ego, that false self, accepting you're human, flawed, and being able to genuinely say, you're right, I messed up, I'm sorry, when called out. The source linked John's need for a false self back to childhood humiliation. Developing real empathy is crucial. Making that leap to truly understand the partner's experience, not just feeling sorry for yourself. John saw Anne as cold, but needed to see that was likely her armor against his behavior, and that underneath she was probably hurt and scared. Responding to her hurt with warmth, not defensiveness.
Seeing behind the defensive.
Yes. Accountability means real, consistent effort to behave differently, not just saying sorry. And finally, patience and accepting uncertainty. Earning back trust takes a very long time, if it happens at all, and the partner might choose not to reconcile. But the work to become a non-abusive person, maybe a decent co-parent, still has to be done.
The steps.
It
Wow. That's not a quick fix at all. That's a fundamental transformation.
really is. And just to give some context, the sources mention some research findings too, like CDC data suggesting 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience severe physical intimate partner violence.
Those numbers are stark.
They are. And the APA conclusion that emotional abuse can be just as damaging long-term as physical abuse. The sources also note abuse cuts across all demographics, though certain communities like LGBTQ+ folks or those with fewer resources might face unique challenges or higher rates. They also reference key concepts like the Duluth model's focus on power and control, attachment theory's insights, the value of trauma-informed care, and that recognizable cycle of abuse tension, explosion, honeymoon phase, then repeat.
So we've covered a lot today. We've looked at defining abuse beyond just the physical, how to recognize signs, including listening to our own bodies and feelings, those tough self-reflection questions, the drivers behind abusive behavior, and that really demanding but possible path to change.
Yeah, and the study guide materials really hammered home some key points.
Yeah.
Abuse is about patterns, not just one-off incidents. Abusers often minimize what they've done, Real change takes ongoing effort. Safety planning is crucial for victims, and this issue is tangled up with mental health, addiction, and social inequalities.
So to wrap things up, let's share some final thoughts, drawing straight from the source material directly for you, our listeners.
If you're someone experiencing abuse, the sources want you to know, first and foremost, you are not to blame. Help is out there. You absolutely deserve to feel safe, to have peace, to find joy. Leaving is often a process, not an event, so planning with support is key. And if, listening today, you recognize some of yourself in those questions about potentially abusive behavior, acknowledging that possibility is the vital first step. The sources strongly advise seeking professional help, and this is critical. Don't involve the person you've harmed in your own healing journey. That work is yours alone. Focus on changing your environment, your words, your core beliefs, your actions. Understand this. Forgiveness isn't something you're entitled to. Safety is. Taking full responsibility for your actions and committing to different behavior in the future is paramount. It goes way beyond just saying sorry.
This was definitely a deep dive into a challenging but incredibly important area. We really hope sifting through these sources has helped bring some clarity to these complex dynamics for you. And maybe a final thought to leave you with, tying back to what we discussed. Consider the power of those subtle signals, both emotional and physical. The sources really highlight that recognizing abuse isn't always about dramatic events. Sometimes it's about tuning into that quiet, persistent feedback from your own body, your own intuition. What might those whispers be trying to tell you about the dynamics in your life? Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.